Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. My name is Nur Hafiza Azwin binti Sumaili and we are from group number 5. We'll be explaining about the Age of Reason. So first off, what does Age of Reason mean? It is a period characterized by the triumph belief of the use of reason, particularly in between 17th century until 18th century in England and France. So it is a period of life where people begin to realize and able to distinguish between what is right and what is wrong, specifically in the societal context. The history of this era began when communications, philosophy, politics, and science were completely reorganized during the long 18th century, which dated back in 1685 until 1815. The enlightened thinkers in Britain, France, and throughout Europe, they began to realize and question the traditional authority, and they embraced the idea that humanity could be enhanced by the changes that are based on rationality, reason, and science. The Enlightenment Era was popular with the production of numerous books, scientific discoveries, new inventions, laws, wars, and revolutions. This era can be defined in 3 phases, which is the first one is the Early Enlightenment, dated between 1695 until 1730. During the Early Enlightenment, the crucial 17th century pioneers included Francis Bacon, Thomas Hobbes, and one of the philosophers in scientific revolution, Galileo Galilei. The works that these pioneers have produced allowed for scientific, philosophical, and mathematical findings to be used as a tool to advance the Enlightenment's development. The next phase is the High Enlightenment, which dated between 1730 until 1780. The significant publication during this period was Diderot's Encyclopedia, which united the leading authors to give rise to an ambitious compilation of human knowledge. It was also the time of religious and anti-religious invention as Christians began to relocate their faith along the rational lines. Meanwhile, deists and materialists, they argued that the universe governed its own course without God's intervention. This means that they emphasized more on science and reason over faith and superstitions. The final phase of this era was the Late Enlightenment and beyond, which dated in 1780 until 1850. The French Revolution in 1789 was the peak of the High Enlightenment vision, as they wanted to replace the authorities into making society as one that follows the rational lines. However, it turned out to be a horrendous and bloody event that led to the rise of the Napoleon. Following to that, the Age of Reason or the Enlightenment era gave out its way to the 19th century Romanticism.
Now, let's move on to the next part, which is the characteristics of the Age of Reason. The distinctive characteristic of this era is the emergence of reason and scientific revolution. Thinkers of this era, like John Locke, believe that reason and knowledge are the keys to happiness and liberty. So they defined scientific and mathematical reasoning as a crucial step towards the realization of the human capacity to attain knowledge. Due to these enlightened views of the world, there were quite an abundance of scientific exploration and discovery in this era. For example, Sir Isaac Newton established scientific laws of universal gravitation and laws of motion. With a significant increase in the levels of literacy among the people, the pursuit of rational scientific knowledge continued to thrive. Moving on, the second characteristic of this era is secularization and its impact on religion. Thinkers of this era used reason to denounce supernatural occurrences. As a result, atheism was induced with church attendance in steady decline throughout the 1700s. But at the same time, another belief emerged, which was called deism. Deism is a mix between Christianity and scientific rationalism. It was also known as the religion of nature, which insisted that religious truth should be based on human reason and observation of the natural world, rather than divine revelation. Basically, they believe in the existence of God. However, it was argued that the universe determined its own course with minimal or zero intervention from God. Lastly, The characteristic of the Age of Reason is the existence of skepticism. Now, this term refers to the attitude of doubting knowledge claims. Any sort of new information will be asked with questions regarding the principles they are based upon or what they actually established. As previously mentioned, this type of reason-driven mentality had caused an incline in the number of atheists and deists. Another example of skepticism was the fact that the people of this era began to question religious dogma, institutionalized church, and the government authority. For example, by the end of the 18th century, there were movements calling for political reform to break free from tyranny, monarchy, and absolutism. So that is all for the characteristics of the Age of Reason, also known as the Enlightenment Era.
Jonathan Swift was an Anglo-Irish author, satirist, and Dean of St. Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin, Ireland. He was born on November 30, 1667 and was a sickly child. He suffered from Meniere's disease, a condition that affected the inner ear, which made him nauseous and hard of hearing. His father, Jonathan Smith, was an attorney and died 2 months before he arrived. Due to this, his mother had a hard time in providing steady incomes and therefore decided to send him to his uncle, Godwin Swift, who was a member of respected professional attorney and judges group's Gray's Inn. He was enrolled in the best school at Dublin at the time, named Kilkenny Grammar School, and there he met William Congreve, a future poet and playwright. He later pursued to Trinity College and received Bachelor of Arts degree. Due to the Glorious Revolution of 1668, he moved to England and worked at Sir Moor Park as an assistant to Sir William Temple for 10 years, helping him with political matters and at the same time researching and publishing his own essays and memoirs. It was rumored he married Esther Johnson in 1716, who he acted as mentor and tutor. They maintained a good relationship until Johnson's death. Suffered from stroke and inability to speak. Johnson died on October 19, 1745 inside Dublin's St. Patrick's Cathedral. Moving on to Jonathan Swift's most famous works throughout his life, which is Gulliver's Travels. In 1726, along with finished manuscript, Jonathan Swift traveled to London with help of several friends. He anonymously published Gulliver's Travels under the name Travels into Several Remote Nations of the World in 4 parts. The books tell a story about Lemuel Gulliver, hero of the books, who embarks on an adventure. However, due to an accident, he ends up on a strange island. He woke up as a giant prisoner. In getting used to the new place and people, a lot of events and challenges occurred. At the end, the incident opens his eyes towards his own society. The purpose of this book is to illustrate how English government and society needed reformation at the time through Jonathan Swift's perspective. There are many major moral values which we can learn from the book, such as get out of our comfort zone, be a learner who seeks others' perspective, seek truth and validation from what we believe, and lastly, pride is both powerful and negative. If we were to relate the story with our times, as stated by Bill Yagin, it is interesting to see how people look at the same exact data regarding COVID-19, but they make it fit into pre-existing narrative of the crisis. Therefore, based on the moral values from the story, he suggested people to learn more and seek truth rather than confirmation.
Let's unravel with me the famous figure of the Age of Reason. So, the famous figure is Cesare Bacaria. Cesare Bacaria is also known as Cesare Bonassana di Bacaria, Marquis of Cultrasco and Villarigo. So, he was born on the 15th of March 1738 and died on the 28th of November 1794. So who is he? He is an Italian criminologist, a jurist, a philosopher, and also a famous politician in the Age of Reason era. He is also an aristocrat of moderate well-being from the Austrian Habsburg Empire. He is one of the most talented jurists in the Age of Reason, or also known as the Age of Enlightenment. He is one of the great thinkers of the Age of Reason and also known as the father of modern criminal law. And he was the first who invented the first modern arguments against the death penalty. He defends his view about the temporal proximity of punishment by appealing to the associative theory. For Beccaria, when a punishment quickly follows a crime, then the two ideas of crime and punishment will be more closely associated in a person's mind. So, he is against death penalty. He is more to a punishment person. So, he wanted those criminals to actually receive a punishment rather than receiving death penalty, because when someone died, they will not learn from their mistake. So instead, Beccaria wants criminal to actually go through punishment instead of death penalty. In November 1768, he was appointed to the chair of law and economy founded expressly for him at the Palatine College of Milan. So, the Beccaria's theories are, as expressed in On Crimes and Punishments, have continued to play a great role in recent times. He is very famous of his theory, and in these TV shows, Crime and Punishment, people actually take his theory and pursue it in the grade of role. That's all for me.
Together with me, let's unravel the character lens or the literary perspective of Gulliver's travel. Let's go! So let's start with Gulliver himself. So Gulliver is the narrator or the protagonist of this story. Gulliver is also a very kind-hearted man with a high sense of justice. Not only that, Gulliver are very educated and intelligent. However, Gulliver can be seen to not have any emotional life, just because his comments are all strictly factual. But it doesn't hide the fact that he is actually very educated and intelligent. Gulliver is also obsessed with navigations, which also had brought him to his travels around the world. And on to his voyage to the Lilliput, he came across the Lilliputians. So who are the Lilliputians? Actually, the Lilliputians are only 6 inches tall, but they are very mean, they are very vicious, and they are nasty, because once they wanted to kill Gulliver. The Lilliputians are very bloody, they are treacherous, and they are reflecting the English politicians at that era. They wanted to make full use of Gulliver just because the war that they are fighting with the Blefuscu. And they are always filled with conspiracy and also jealousy. And on Gulliver's travel or voyage to the Brobdingnag, he met with the king of Brobdingnag. And the character of this king is very in contrast with the emperor of Lilliput. Why? Because the king is very intellectual, very educated, and also has deeper knowledge in politics. But through many discussions with Gulliver, especially about the great law and politics of England, the king actually finds fault with all the English institutions. The comparison between the king's liberal governance and also the rule under England's burgess class reveals the corruption of its politics. Moving on to the next voyage to the Hoyams. At there, Gulliver met with the Yahoos. Who are the Yahoos? So practically, Yahoos are humans just like us, but they are naked. They are filthy and they are primitive. And also they are filled with absurd sexual desire, as when Gulliver wanted to take a bath, he was naked. And then a girl was trying to rape him. So Gulliver was absolutely disgusted at that. But he appreciated the kindness and the rationals of the Hoyams. The Hoyams are the rational horses. They are very rational, they are truthful, honest, reasonable and wise. Actually, Gulliver was very sad to leave them. The other interesting character is the Laputa people. Gulliver met them on the voyage to Laputa. The Laputa people is in contrast and very different with the Yahoos.
Why? Because they are very intelligent, they are educated, and they are very smart. The Laputa people, they are very interested in the trajectories of comets and also the course of the sun. They did not mistreat Gulliver, but they did dismiss him because they believed that Gulliver is less intelligent than them. But they did nothing to improve the lives of the low-lying and also the poor people. And it shows that in 18th century, the royals and also the privileged actions always took against the low and middle people.
I would like to reveal the dark side of the Age of Reason. Aww. Don't be scared. It's not that dark. Maybe just a little bit of spice. Did you know that they actually have wizards, alchemists, and spiritual seekers? Yes, they did. So I found a journal and the researcher named Leonard and Paul. They focused on the dark side of the so-called Age of Reason. In a series of highly entertaining sketches, they present the continuity of belief in healing by touch, mystical visions, ritual magic, Kabbalah, alchemy, and other practices that scandalized some enlightened observers as unfounded, irrational, and superstitious. John V. Fleming takes evident in delight in describing how those European obsession with the Freemasonry, a secret society whose tolerant and egalitarian principles have often been viewed as the central to enlightened culture, could sometimes go hand in hand with the taste of some money spirit or making gold from the lead. The protection of Masonic lodges allowed the ambitious practitioners of magic like Count Cagliostro to forge international reputation for themselves. Fleming concludes with the remarkable story of Julie von Credina, a Livonian mystic whose dramatic life and visionary writings presage the Romantic Age. Fleming's approach to the subject is broad, episodic, and unsystematic. He frequently pauses in the middle of a story in order to trace the etymological origin of particular words, demonstrating their root to the medieval